Good evening, everybody. I am Gina B, and the place to be is here with me and Mama D every Thursday evening right here in the Fox Den. Tonight we have a returning guest, John Vespasian. He's been on a few times before talking about a few of his books, which he now has 11. And we are going to be talking about his latest book, Asymmetry. What I'm going to do is I will play the intro video for him. You'll learn a little bit about him. And then when that is finished, we will start the interview with him. So we'll be back. John Vespasian is the author of 11 books about rational living, including When Everything Fails, Try This, 2009. Rationality is the Way to Happiness, 2009. The Philosophy of Builders, 2010. The 10 Principles of Rational Living, 2012. Rational Living, Rational Working, 2013. Consistency, the Key to Permanent Stress Relief, 2014. On Becoming Unbreakable, 2015. Thriving in Difficult Times, 2016. Sequentiality, the Amazing Power of Finding the Right Sequence of Steps, 2017. Undisrupted, How Highly Effective People Deal with Disruptions, 2019. And Asymmetry, the Shortcut to Success When Success Seems Impossible, in 2020. Vespasian has lived in Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. His books combine his passion for history, investing, and personal development, reflecting his philosophy of rational living, productiveness, and respect for the individual. The purpose of my work is to draw practical lessons from history, he explains. If you want to make good decisions, you have to look at the big picture and learn from the wisdom accumulated in centuries of human experience. Knowledge is the only valid response to stress, the only formula that can make you more effective, John argues. My books contain the wisdom I have accumulated in decades of research. It's all about learning from other people's successes and mistakes and figuring out how to apply those principles to your own life. In every book, I go through biographies and historical events with the goal of extracting from them lessons we can use right now, he says. Well, let's welcome him to the Fox Den. Okay, and we're here. Hello, John. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Gina. Hi, Mama. How are you doing? Many thanks for having me on.
Hi, John.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yes, I've missed you. It's been a while since you've been on the show.
I write as fast as I can, but it comes to one book per year. So this is my production ability at the moment.
Well, you do a great job, and they're very good books. So we are going to be talking about Asymmetry. That is your 11th book. And so we're going to just ask you a bunch of questions about that. So to get the general gist of the book and all, why is wishful thinking so prevalent in our society?
I think to give a short answer is because we absorb too much fiction. And I don't mean that people spend the whole day watching TV. Some do, unfortunately. But the sources we use for information, for interacting with society, they are fictional to a great extent, or they are polluted by fiction. Many inputs we get about the world, it's going through editorials, it's going through a bias of the people who are putting the information there for many reasons. Some reasons are perfectly legitimate, but you have to realize that unless you make an effort, a conscious effort, to get inaccurate information about the world, you are going to absorb a massive amount of fiction. What you watch on TV, what you read on newspapers, what you hear on the radio, many times is going to have a strong bias. It's going to be very emotional because it is legitimate for the media to try to make things interesting. but sometimes they're just too interested. They keep people in panic. They keep people in a high stress situation, so that they keep watching, they keep buying the newspaper or the TV show, whatever it is. And you have to be careful with that. And the result is that you have 50 million Americans taking medication against anxiety, against high stress. And this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous for a population, and it's very dangerous for individuals, for your life. So one of the messages for my book is that you have to be careful with the inputs you absorb. If you don't filter, if you don't use your judgment, you might be getting too much biased information.
Absolutely.
Very
Mom,
true.
would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah. Hi, John. Does history teach us how to get unstuck from stagnation and hopelessness?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, but not the kind of history you learn at school, unfortunately. Because when you get to school, in most cases, I mean, not in every school, not in every college, but you get to school, usually it's a succession of battles and dates and names of presidents and kings. That is, it is not very useful. The lessons you learn, they are sort of prepackaged. They give you an idea of history as something linear. For most people, it's just a waste of time. They go out of school or they go out of college with a absolute hatred, or at least indifference to history. And this is very dangerous because then you close yourself to any kind of wisdom. You just operate on a very short range information. You see problems coming at you from different directions, and then you have no perspective. The loss of perspective is one of the great problems of the 21st century. We are facing basically the same problems that humanity has been facing in different centuries, and the problems have been solved. The solutions are known. The problem is you don't have perspective from history. You have to reinvent the wheel every time. People get extremely stressed. They get extremely angry. They get violent. And this is very bad for those who suffer the consequences, and even for the individuals who are getting angry and frustrated and desperate. If you don't have the perspective from history, you will not find the solution, because reinventing the wheel every time is very expensive. It's very hard on your emotions. And what I'm trying to do in my books is to give this perspective from a practical point of view. I think history has to be approached as a teacher of interesting stories, a teacher of practical lessons. And this is the approach I propose to history, which is very far away from what you get in college or at school.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah, just in your introduction of your book, when you were talking about the two artists, Michelangelo and what was his name? Torrigiano. Because he's not. Yes, Torrigiano. Like two artists, like almost the same caliber of work, expertise, artistry. That good, but Michelangelo was famous and got all those huge contracts, and the other did not. Ended up going to jail and actually dying in jail. So it's not always what you think it's going to be, just because you have the talents and the spark. Mama D and I have similar things, but we have very dissimilar things.
Right.
But it's like
we're both good at talking, but you're better at some things and I'm better at other things.
But that's the thing. So not everybody's the same.
No.
So in what way do linear expectations, right, lead to wasted efforts?
Well, we see this today. We are now in this COVID story. I think we can go through the details in different countries. It's very interesting because first people have the perception that oh, this is new, it's in history, has never happened, so we have to try different solutions, and who knows what's going to happen. And actually, these kind of situations where we have extreme overreactions, and people they don't know what to do. They become very stressed and sometimes very angry. And what I'm trying to argue in this book, the latest book, this asymmetry, is that when you are facing these situations, most of these overreactions they come from trying to think linearly, to trying to address the problem like an isolated issue, and say, okay, we have a headache, so the problem must be in the head, or we have back pain, and the problem must be in my back. And what the book is doing is to try to show in history that when you have these problems with this COVID, or you have a headache or whatever, most of the time, the reasons and the solutions, they're asymmetric. It's not what you actually think it is because it looks like obvious. I say, I have a headache, the problem is in my head, or I have a back pain, the problem is in my back. I have this COVID story, so the problem is the COVID story. And actually, most of the time when you look in history, it is not. It happens very often that since we look at problems from a very short range, we say, I have a headache, so it must be problems in my head. We try immediately to react, sometimes very aggressively, against what we believe to be the problem. And in history, we see that these delusions of linearity, which I call in the book, we try to say, okay, if it looks like this, it must be like this. It is very deceiving. You have to take a step back, and when you have a headache, and when you have these situations like COVID, or you have something, you have to take a step back and say, okay, pretty sure something like this has happened before. What is the real reason? What is the real solution? What do we have to do? And when you have a headache, most of the time, the problem is not in your head. It's going to be a stress. It's going to be a lifestyle problem. It's going to be a sleep problem. The reason and the solution is going to be asymmetric. And this is why this tendency to think linearly, to try to say, okay, there's a problem here. The solution has to be this because it looks so obvious. No, don't deceive yourself. Most of the time, the reason for a headache is not in your head. It has to be something else. It has to be a problem somewhere else. So you have to open your eyes. You have to look into history to see similar situations, to see similar sickness or similar events, to get an idea what is the best solution. So again, linear thinking is the automatic reaction you get from watching, I think, too many movies and saying that there is something wrong, so there's a superhero and comes and is going to fix the problem. Life is not like this. If you think about your own life, how you solve your problems in the past, how you cure yourself from sickness, how you found friends, how you found your profession, you will see that most of the time it was not linear. There was a lot of trial and error. There were a lot of surrounding factors. There were a lot of experiments that show you that what you thought was obvious, what you thought was the right reaction did not work, because you didn't have all the information, because you were looking at problems from a very short range perspective. So what I'm trying to show in this book is that be careful with these linear obvious reactions, because you might overreact and you might be doing something that is actually counterproductive. So this is one of the messages from the book.
Mm-hmm. And a good one.
It is, and it's very true, because you think you have a headache. Some people can go, it's not just a headache, it's like a brain cancer, and it's something as simple, like you said, it could have been as of sleeping wrong or watching too much TV or playing too much on my cell phone. So it makes a lot of sense. Okay, why do human beings love symmetric fairy tales?
Yeah, this is to a certain extent is genetic, because human intelligence logic, it is made of pattern recognition, and since we learn to speak as children, as infants, we learn to speak by recognizing patterns. We recognize sounds, and we recognize grammar automatically as children. And then we put sentences together, and we develop this linear thinking, which is the normal intelligence. The problem is that when you are dealing with complex problems, you need to go beyond linearity. And the pattern recognition, which is the basis of human intelligence, has to be developed into an abstract level. So it's easy to see that if you boil water, eventually, okay, it will eventually get very warm. Eventually, you can make a cup of tea. When you have a very simple event, a series of events, you can recognize the pattern. But when you are dealing with complex personal problems, we're dealing with societal problems, we're dealing with emotions, this kind of straight linear logic is very dangerous. And the problem is that through the educational system and through the societal stories, the logic gets reinforced to a level which becomes dangerous. Because every movie we watch, every TV series has the same logic, the same pattern, and then there is a problem, and then there is a hero that's going to come to solve the problem. The hero knows exactly the problem. The secret agent knows exactly who is the criminal, and the pattern goes on and on forever. And the truth is that most of the time, the detective does not know who the criminal is, has no clue, has very little information. And what you see on TV, what you watch on these Hollywood movies, it is fiction. All this linearity, all these obvious patterns, this obvious logic. You cannot invest in the stock market like this. You will lose all your money in a few days because reality is much more complex. So this is the message from the book. You have to open your eyes to asymmetric information. You have to open your eyes to the environment, because a very simple, a very straight logic might be good enough for children, because children are protective. But in daily life, you will be shooting yourself in the foot with this constrained thinking.
Yeah. So no knight in shining armor is going to come rescue you and solve all your problems. No. All right. So why do meaningless pursuits exert such an irresistible appeal?
It has an appeal because it is so compelling. For children, when you tell them the fairy tale, even if they are only a few years old and they cannot read, they can barely understand sometimes television, but you tell them a fairy tale about a princess on I don't know, something magical, and they're fascinated, and they want to hear another one tomorrow, and then another one tomorrow, another one tomorrow. And at a certain point, we need to outgrow those fairy tales. We have to realize that most of the time there will be no superhero, there will be no magical solution. Most of the time there is only the fog of war. There is this extreme complexity, extreme ignorance, extreme uncertainty that many people go crazy because they don't know, my God, my life was going so fine, and then this happens, and now I don't know what's going to happen, and they go crazy with uncertainty. But this is normal. This is life. This is a fairy tale. Is not normal. It's just a fairy tale. Most of the time, you have to deal with uncertainty. You have to deal with probability. This is what makes people good investors. What makes people good at running a business. They develop the ability to deal with uncertainty, to detect asymmetric information, to act on the basis of probability, not certainty. It's a skill that you have to learn. And if you don't learn this skill, if you don't learn from history, you will remain at the level of a child or a teenager, very emotional, very angry, and you will be doing yourself a great disservice. And the whole point of this book is to outgrow this poor thinking, and to try to liberate yourself, to liberate readers from beliefs that are really not true. Even if you look around and say, "Oh, everybody believes that should be like this," but look at the results. Look at how people are doing that. And I come back to the example of the stock market, which is a great teacher of history and logic, because it's so frustrating. And people sometimes they give up and say, "Oh God, this is all random. I don't know." Actually, if you develop the logic of a good investor or the logic of a good healer, because it's the same also for people who can heal a complex psychosomatic conditions. If you develop the logic of looking at the whole picture, of looking at the surrounding environment, you will do much better. But it's not symmetric. It is not linear. It is very complex.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people can't, I kind of call that multitasking. A lot of people can't handle that. Mama, you want to ask the next one? You're muted.
Sorry, I was about to sneeze, so I figured I'd mute myself. Okay. Why are high stress, anxiety, and depression so widespread nowadays?
Yeah, because instead of looking at stories, looking at examples that can show us the way, we look at our neighbors, or we look at we watch TV, and then the problem, which is a problem which is solvable, which is not new, is a problem that has happened before. It gets blown completely out of proportion. Because if you have uncertainty, you are suffering from some sickness or some constraint or some event, and you lose your job, and you look at your neighbor who also lost his job, then you tend to panic because, oh my God, the whole world is being disrupted. People get very angry, very afraid. If you don't look at the whole story, and you don't look at the whole picture, you panic, and then you lose the ability to make good decisions, because then you become withdrawn. You start to react over emotionally. You make one mistake after another mistake, and then it becomes a snowball of errors. And you look at your neighbor, and the neighbor is also panicking. Oh my God, everybody's panicking, and this is the end of the world. And I have to tell you, now that we are in this COVID story, you only need to travel a little bit if you can, or some people, unfortunately, if you are in a country that has no neighbors or very few neighbors, it's difficult to travel. But in Europe, it's very easy. Europe, as you know, the countries are very small. Some countries you can drive through the country in 5 hours, and it's very easy to travel. I was in the Czech Republic. I was in Italy, And you can see that the reaction to this COVID story is very different. Some countries become closed and they stop operating. Some countries do basically nothing. Some countries, people don't even react. They don't wear masks. There is no social distancing. There is no restrictions to anything, and people just go on with their lives. You go there and you move a few hundred kilometers and say, "My God, it's a different planet." And people are not stressed, and people are not panicking, and people are not destroying their business. And everybody's in the restaurants are full. The streets are full, the shops, the malls are full. Nobody is thinking about the COVID anymore. Maybe they were thinking about it 4 months ago, but certainly not today. And then you wonder, my God, is it the same continent, the same planet? And this is because when people look at problems, there is not only one solution. There are different solutions. You have to look into history to see what is most likely to work. And you have to refrain from making hasty decisions that might look they might look magical, they might look very heroic, but be careful because you might not have the whole information. And this today, what's going on today in the world is again teaching us an important lesson. This reminding us of a lesson that what you think, what you see, might not be the whole truth. You might not have the whole information. You might be overreacting. And look at what other people are doing. Look at what other people have done in history. The lessons are there. You can find them. It takes a little bit of effort to do research. You might need half an hour. You might need an hour. And sometimes if you have a sickness and you have a medical condition, it might take you weeks of research to find the solution. You might have to talk to different therapists. You might have to talk to different counselors. But if you are persistent, you will find stories, you will find proof, you will find traces of people who have overcome the same problems or very similar problems. And then you will know the answer, and then you will become peaceful at heart, and you will be able to make the right decision. To become overly stressed, panic is not the right answer.
It never is, but that's
Never
what
is.
the whole world is in a state of panic right now. And what's funny, because now I'm in the States and Mama D, she's up in Canada. All right, now I'm in Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania, it was very, very strict not too long ago about what to do. Now my daughter's in West Virginia. Now West Virginia hardly had any cases at all, if any, on the board. I went to visit her and my grandson. And when I got out there, I swear, as soon as you cross the line, nobody's wearing masks, right? Nobody's sick. Nobody's wearing masks. Everyone's still going to restaurants, still doing everything. This is West Virginia. It's not like another country. I mean, it's West Virginia, right? And no one was sick. It was really strange. Now, I went to the doctor this week, right? I got turned away because I had a slight fever, and I mean, like, it was 99 point something, and then she came back out and did it again, and it was 100, and they said, "Oh no, go get a COVID test." I'm like, "Oh my God!"
Because you're sitting in a hot car.
Well, I had my air conditioning blasting, but I haven't been feeling well, so I'm not feeling well, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to the doctor. So here I am, like I'm relating to everything you're saying because I'm not feeling well, but. They have to, because of the COVID frenzy that is the whole world now, it's like you have to rule that out first. So here we go. I had to pay for the doctor visit, for them to boot me out of the office to go get a COVID test, wait for that to come back. It's negative, by the way. So now I got to make another appointment, pay again to go to the doctor to figure out what's going on, because I'm still not feeling well. So it's insanity, the craziness. So why do people tend to view these short-term constraints as long-term impairments?
Yeah, because we have this mentality of continuity, and this is because the way we see the world, the way we construct our lives, is like a Hollywood movie, like a fairy tale, like we see as children. We see a very simple logic of step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they are all predictable. They are all continuous. And when people go to the doctor and say, you have this back pain, it is chronic, you might go to a therapist to get some massage, but maybe it will never help. Maybe it will be forever, and you're getting old. These things are really harsh, and then you go out of the doctor with the word chronic in your head and say, my God, this is incurable. I will not be able to sit straight ever again, because we get this idea of continuity. And it is natural, but you have to resist it. Because otherwise, every time you get someone tells you, you apply for a job and they tell, you're not good enough because you are lacking this degree or whatever. If you take it too seriously and you don't look at other sources of information, you might develop a view of the world which is self-limiting. And then you get this idea of continuity. Oh my God, I only got this degree, and then this is my only possibility. So it's very limited. What am I going to do? It is so hard. There are no opportunities. And you are just inventing a story. You are just watching a movie, and you believe this continuity, that there is a problem and the problem will always be there. You cannot solve it, and tomorrow it will be even worse. And this is nonsense. This is complete nonsense, but it is natural. Unless you look at history and you look at careers of people, and you mentioned this. One example from the book, you mentioned the career of Michelangelo and Torrigiano. They were artists from the 16th century and developed very different careers. The problem, Torrigiano was very talented. He was maybe not as talented as Michelangelo was very close. He was a great sculptor, a great artist. The problem is the guy just did not open his mind enough to find good opportunities. He got in a very restricted market, and he was blaming the world. He was very angry about Michelangelo that was so successful, but Torrigiano could have become very successful. Probably he was basically shooting himself in the foot by believing a story that was not true. So one of the mistakes he made, for instance, when he went, Michelangelo was working in Italy. There was a great market for architecture, for painting. He was really in the right place, but Torrigiano went to Spain,
London,
and the market was very small. And eventually, the guy became very angry, became very depressed, and he started to become very aggressive. And this is what happens today, that people create the story that everything is limited, there are no opportunities, the problems are permanent. But no, open your eyes, look at history, look at other countries. Sometimes you will have to move. As you mentioned, you were mentioning Pennsylvania and West Virginia. I have to tell you, this would be, if people are fed up, sometimes you have to move or you have to do something else. Because continuity is deceiving. Don't you believe that because you have been born in a certain place, because you have learned a certain language, you cannot learn something else? And some Americans go fed up and they go and live in Mexico and they say, fine, I'm sorry, I don't like it. The taxes are too high or whatever, and they go to Costa Rica, or they go to Europe, or they go wherever. And it seems impossible. When you think people doing one thing for 20 years and say, my God, what is this guy doing in Costa Rica? At a certain point, the people or the person decided to change and say, sorry, I'm going to write a different story. And they start and they change their life and they change their environment. They change sometimes their profession or they start a business and do something else. And this is the way you have to look at life. You have to read examples. And the book, like all my previous books and this book, they consist of biographies, consist of short stories of different people doing things that are not self-evident. And they have a career, they have a family, they have problems, and they do something that is not linear. They do something that is not obvious, and they break the pattern. And this is something that you might have to do in your own life if you are frustrated with the situation or with the environment or with your slow progress. Sometimes you have to do something else. You have to move. And I'm sorry to tell you the truth that is not nice sometimes, but history gives you the keys. You cannot get different results by doing the same thing over and over again. Sometimes you will have to do something different.
Yep.
Exactly.
That is.
Exactly. And that's kind of like us when in the situation where we are. I can't go to work for my reasons, and Gina can't go to work for her reasons. So our way of stepping out of our box to stretch a little bit is doing this. We do our radio shows, and we do different things. You just sort of have to step out of your box to find out something else that will make you happy. So yeah, I'm happy. Okay, how can people find workable strategies for situations? Try that one again. Workable strategies when there's no action that they can foresee a possible action for.
Yeah, this is the problem we face every day. That we have a medical condition, we have a financial problem. We don't see any solution, and then we become very, very stressed. It has happened in history a million times that people see a problem and say, "Oh God, there's no alternative. This is the only alternative," and they start to make stupid things. Let me just give you an example from the book. In European history, in the Middle Ages, there were a lot of also conflicts and strife within the different parts of society. And there were a lot of killings, a lot of violence, social violence, very similar to what we have today. Today in the US, it is very unfortunate that we have this civil strife. I mean, it's very violent. If you are caught in one of these riots, you might even get killed. And this has happened in history a million times. It's not something that it was invented a few weeks ago and people started to burn the cities. Look at history, it has happened a million times. I was recently in the Czech Republic, and there when you go, you walk around, very often you find statues or you find monuments for a national hero. His name was Jan Hus. He was a religious revolutionary from the 15th century. And it reminds me very much at what's going on today, because in the 15th century, the amount of corruption and the amount of problems, we cannot even imagine how bad it was. I mean, many posts, political posts, or many positions of responsibility, there were no elections, so people just paid money and they became a bishop or they became a pope, or it was the level of corruption you cannot even imagine. It was astonishing. And when you look at history, and people became very angry, they became despondent, and many people became depressed and say, "Oh, there is nothing we can do." And then this guy, Jan Hus, was one of the revolutionaries of the time. He was in the Catholic Church, and he started to agitate for solutions. Say, "Oh, we have to stop this corruption. We have to stop this absolute disaster in administration because it's making people very poor." And he was right. He was right fundamentally. But the problem is that, like many people today, Hus thought there was only one answer, which was confrontation and riots and this kind of thing. And eventually it became very violent in this 16th century. I mean, there was a war for decades, and they killed thousands and thousands of people, and it was very brutal. It was not like today where people are arrested and there's a trial. No, they just hanged them and they burned the whole city. It was horrible. And Hus, just to give you an example of this linear thinking, Hus at a certain point, he convinced one of the local leaders, and they made him head of the university, the dean of the University of Prague. And Prague was a very open city. They had this university, and they had different language. They had Czech, they had the Polish, they had German. So it was the main university in the area. And they had thousands of students with different nationalities, different races, different backgrounds, and they were getting along very well. There were also different professors from different countries, different ideologies, and they gave lessons in the university, and if they got students, they were paid, and it was working well. And then this Jan Hus came and said, no. We have to remove all the dissidents. We have to remove all the people who do not endorse the new theories. And he changed the university and said, no, everybody has to speak Czech starting tomorrow. If you don't speak Czech, you are a foreigner, you are a minority, and then you go out. He thought that this was the simple solution. This was the obvious solution to all problems. Everybody has to speak Czech. And what happened? He was very naive, like today, when people become, oh, the solution is that we need this and this and this, and otherwise we burn down the city. I think he had a good intention, but he didn't realize that these linear solutions, they don't work. So what happened is horrible. The professors who were speaking German, were speaking Polish, said, come on, we've been working here for 20 years. We have students, they come to our lessons, they are in German, they are in Polish. Why does everybody have to speak Czech? So what did they do? The Hus was thinking that people were going to start speaking Czech as of next week. The professors left en masse. They just moved to another city. And they started another university. They went to Leipzig. It's only 100 kilometers away. They went there. They started another university. And the students left. Thousands of students left. And then the Polish professors said, why are we wasting our time here? So they just walk away, and they started an university in Krakow, a very famous university today, and a few thousand students left. And Jan Hus, the king of the mountain, was left with a completely destroyed university, and people have left, and they never came back. They never came back. It was completely destroyed, and eventually Hus continued to make mistake. And the guy had good intentions. He wanted to solve the problem, but he was very simple-minded. And this is the message from the book. You cannot solve complex problems by doing very linear things, because reality is complex. You have to see why people are angry. You have to see why people are doing what they are, why there is corruption, why there is things, because you have to solve the problem asymmetrically. If you start doing simple things and say, oh, the solution to COVID is that everybody has to be at home for 20 years, it looks like very easy, but you see, it doesn't work. It obviously doesn't work. Jan Hus, when you look at history, he was very depressed when he realized that the students started to leave. The professors started to leave and say, come back. But they never came back. They said, come on, we are fed up. We are not going to put up with this thing anymore. You want to have a Czech university? You have a Czech university. We are out of here. And I tell you, it changed the course of history, because Germany started to have a very strong scientific basis. Poland as well. It changed the course of history just because one guy had this narrow-minded mentality. And I have to tell you, we have to learn from history. Don't make this kind of mistakes that you have a problem and they say, oh, the solution is that, everybody has to do this. Think a little bit more, because you might be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, they're doing that with Mama D was just saying up in Canada. They want everyone
in Quebec. In Quebec,
French.
yeah. They want to save the traditions and of the French language, so they're making it so that we have to speak French as first language in all businesses, and I think that's eliminating a majority of the people, because we're not just French people up here, we're both. And you can't say that, oh, you can only speak, they would like us just to say bonjour when you walk into a store, but people who don't understand French don't get it. So I think we should send that book to the Prime Minister of Premier of Quebec.
I'm telling you that you should refer that, because
except it's an English book, so he probably wouldn't read it. So
get a French version, but we will just say lose half your people if you don't snap out of it.
Well, we're sort of, some of us English folks are sitting still and saying, "Go on yourself."
Yeah, even in the stores, the signs, the signs, the big signs in French and the little teeny signs in English.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
And they even made. They were talking way back when it started to change names of stores to the French version if they wanted to stay here in Quebec. Some companies did that, and oui, madame. Some companies did that. The Bay. Thebay is Leba. I think it's Baie. I'm not sure because the spelling not good at my. But they changed the names, and donut is, you can't change every word. So McDonald's couldn't be changed to something French because it was a name. But if it had,
Yep. Oh. Well, we lost Mama. All right, but John, why is this book warning readers against little truisms?
Yeah, it is warning people against. Generally speaking, it's warning people against rigidity. It is warning people about thinking that if you had one profession, one sickness, one constraint, it is warning against the idea that there is only one direction. And it is difficult to overemphasize this problem, because when you are in the middle of a crisis, a health crisis, and you are sick, or you are having financial problems, it's okay. It's very easy for me to tell you, you should not panic, you should not do. But I understand that people become very stressed. The only solution I have found for myself, and I think for people who want to become a bit more effective, a bit more rational, is to actually learn about stories from history that give you this warning. When you are in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a financial or a personal crisis or health problem, you remember the story automatically. Say, hey, don't panic, because I know this and this and this happened, and it turned out well. And I know the principle behind, and I learn the story. And then people become more relaxed, they become more self-confident, more self-reliant, and they sort of start looking at their own problems in a more sensible way. But unless you have this background, and you have made the effort to read, to think about stories, and to internalize these messages, when the crisis comes, it is very hard to change your ways. If you have this mentality that you have to react emotionally, and you panic, it might be a huge amount of work to react differently, because we are trained by society, by stories. We are trained to this linear reaction, and you have to break the pattern. And let me just give you a story from the book, How Dangerous This Is, because we do it all the time, but we do not see it because it's in our own lives. We cannot look at our own lives from outside, from some perspective. We get enmeshed in the story, and then it looks like there is no alternative. It looks like, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. There is no alternative. I only know this. I cannot do that. But it is very dangerous. And just to give you an idea, one of the biographies or the stories I present in the book briefly is the life of Mozart, who was a great musician, a great composer from the 18th century. And Mozart had a bit this problem because he was a very good musician. He liked to perform. He was a great composer. But the problem is that, like many people today, Mozart was very linearly minded. He had talent. He had a great gift. But he could not really think out of the box, and eventually he died very young. He died in his I think it was late 20s or early 30s. He died very young. He was working 18 hours a day, for years. He never took a holiday. He was always working. And when you look at his life, there is a great lesson to learn, because it was exactly the same that is happening to many people today. He was a great composer. He was a great musician. He had one qualification. He started to do what he knew what to do. He was playing concerts. He was writing music to everybody who asked him. And he wrote a piece of music for a birthday, a piece of music for a funeral, a piece of music for a party. And he wrote and wrote and wrote. He would get some money, and then he gave piano lessons. Then he would make he gave concerts, and it was a very stressful life because he was making very little money. And the problem is that he didn't bother to take a step back and say, "My God, why I'm doing this? I'm working 18 hours a day. I'm barely making ends meet. I'm always chasing. How can I really change this pattern?" Because he had, like many people, Mozart had the feeling that he could not change. There was no alternative. This was what he knew what to do, and he didn't know what to do. When you look at his life from the perspective of the 21st century, and you look at what he's doing, actually the solution was very obvious. You look at what he could have done. He could have changed his life completely, but he didn't have this asymmetric mentality. I tell you at the end of the story, what happens is that Mozart was doing a little of everything that he could to make money. He was extending himself with these piano lessons, these little compositions, while he could have made a fortune in opera. Opera was the big business in music in the 18th century. Mozart was a good composer, but he could not write the lyrics. And he eventually realized that he was missing a boat, and he teamed up with a professor, an Italian professor in Venice, and the professor wrote the lyrics for all these famous operas, this Don Giovanni that Mozart wrote. And they made a huge amount of money because the opera was a big business. This was the only business where people actually paid money in the 18th century, and the opera was playing for months, and it was generating royalties, and you could play it in different cities. And Mozart, at a certain point, he realized that this was a good business. He was making money, but the problem is that he didn't want to stop doing everything else. He didn't want to stop doing all the other things that were so obvious. He thought, I'm a musician. I have to spend my time giving concerts, even if I don't make any money. I have to spend my time giving piano lessons. He was very reluctant to change his view and start doing operas, because opera is basically writing. It is composing. It is not... it's not so spectacular, but it was the answer. He didn't have to work 18 hours a day. He would have been working 4 hours a day by concentrating on the right opportunity and making much more money. The problem is that, as I said in the book, it was asymmetric. It was not the obvious answer for a musician not to play music, because playing music, you didn't make money. There were too many people playing piano. There were too many people giving concerts almost for free. It was impossible. But to write opera, you need a different qualification. And I tell you, Mozart could have lived 20 years longer, 30 years longer. He could have written 20 operas. The problem, he killed himself. And when he died, he was writing a piece of music for a couple of $100. It is astonishing. The guy was writing music for a funeral, music that would have been performed only once. So it was a complete waste of time. And instead of writing operas, instead of going for the big opportunity, he could not stop himself from this mentality that I have no choice. I have no choice. I have to do everything. I have to tell you, today is the same. Many people, they find themselves in a pattern of overwork, high stress. They are chasing very scarce opportunities, and they're killing themselves. It is very sad. They're repeating the mistakes that Mozart made in the 18th century. It is exactly the same. But of course, if you don't know about Mozart, and you don't know about the story, and you don't know about the lesson, you think that your story is unique and that you have no choice. And then you panic, you are very stressed. And I have to tell you, you have to break out of this mentality, because it is killing many people. It is very dangerous. And it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy.
You're not kidding. Believe me, I lived it. I was like, instead of explaining what to do to someone, I mean, I eventually had people work for me and got them to actually do work. But a lot of times I would just be like, just step aside, let me do it. I'll do it. It's just easier for me to do it, than beat your head against a wall. So, so I understand that. This is kind of reminiscent of our show last week too.
Yeah.
But
I think also a lot of people are in that and as simple as living paycheck to paycheck, they work just to make ends meet, but they're not happy with what they're doing. And they realize it, but they think, I can't get out of this. So it's a lot of people are in that boat.
I was been a workaholic, always. I started all my businesses. I mean, I had a cleaning business going, and I would do windows and carpets and clean houses, and then I'd do the design business. So I'm designing on the computer and the other times, and then I'm going up doing consults, and then I start ripping out kitchens, and it was like constantly.
Yeah. Somewhere. So should we ask Bob if he has any?
Not anymore. I wore myself out, and I did exactly what he said. I was killing myself.
Exactly. It's very true.
Okay.
Okay. Why is the book recommending readers to narrow down their choices of obvious winners?
Yeah, because the tendency to chase too many rabbits is very, for most people, is exhausting. And we have this tendency in life to try to do I don't know, millions of things every day, and people want to work 18 hours. They want to sleep sufficiently. Then they want to watch TV. They want to read the news, and they want to take the children to the baseball game. And they chase rabbits, and they chase rabbits here and there. And the problem is that each rabbit is running in a different direction. And unless you integrate the whole picture and say, oh come on, a day has 24 hours. I have to sleep. I have to eat properly. You might not know this in the US, but some people actually cook their own food. And they cook slowly. And in Europe, actually people make a pot and they put vegetables, and it takes hours, and sometimes they do it for the whole week. But people actually cook. It's something that many people do not even conceive that you could have this thing. And it is not so difficult. But you have to have a lifestyle integrated where the rabbits they are sort of coordinated, and you are not chasing in too many directions, because very soon you will develop this mentality that I have no alternative, it's too difficult, I have no time, I cannot learn anything because I have no time to read, I have no time even to listen to a book. And then you are Mozart again. You are just killing yourself. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
tell you, when you go to another country and see that people are actually, if you go, I mean, if you are American, for instance, or you are German, and you go to Italy or you go to Greece, it is still a shock. The different mentality of people, how they see life, how they take their time for lunch, and they cook at home and this kind of stuff, still is very different from different countries. And I have to tell you, it might lead you to question things that you do, and you think that you have no alternative, and you say, why are people doing this differently and seems to work? And sometimes people dismiss foreigners too hastily and say, oh, it's just this country, the people are stupid. But maybe they're not stupid. Maybe they're doing something else. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Deanna's asking me if I got my hair cut. Yes. It's very short. It's very short. Yes.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Obsessive. Well, this is the time that we are going to take a little 3-minute commercial break, and we will be back and continue talking about his book Asymmetry. And also, if you are listening to the audio of this show, you can always go over to the YouTube channel, which is Fox Den, hosted by Gina Bankston. You can see all our shows there and you can see the videos and the things and the pictures that we put up instead of just listening. We'll be back in 3 minutes. The Fox Den is now proudly sponsored by Vortex Ghost Gear, one of the leading fabricators of paranormal equipment. Bob Christopher is the founder and creator of Vortex Ghost Gear. He has decades of investigating, starting with his team at NEPA, and as lead in the popular local TV show Ghost Detectives, he has experience of how spirits could be seen or heard. Using this knowledge, he has manufactured equipment for specific scenarios of spirit manifestation and communication. He is the only manufacturer of the popular lifelike trigger prop cats and dogs. Using proximity meters wired to lights and sound, these prove to be highly effective communication devices in the field of study. The HTO, another Vortex exclusive, allowing specific items to be the highlight or trigger of your investigation. For example, place the item on a metal tray or attach directly to any metal object such as keys or glasses that continue to go missing or moved. Ask the spirit to touch the item. The HTO will light. It has a sound option as well. This device was used in Travel Channel's Ghost Nation with great results. The Dome, a static detector, can be the most useful device in your gear bag. This is to back up the theory that the spirits manifest using static electricity. Using several, you can track a spirit, for example, walking down a hallway, setting off each as it passes. The geophone detects vibrations. This is another way to track movement. If a claim is footsteps in the hallway or stairwell, set the sensitivity and place the device in that area. Its band of lights will show a range of vibrations from the slightest tapping, lighting only a few lights, to the loudest thumping, lighting the entire range. The Easy Scan ghost boxes are very popular due to the ease of use. They are custom decorated to the individual or team using them. Bob programs and uses an Arduino-based computer scanning FM waves to potentially communicate with the spirit realm in real time. Every box is unique and all custom hand decorated by Gina Bankston. The V-Pod has a special place for those who love the idea of REM pods. Use this sleeker, smaller, easier to transport device. It is a must-have in your gear bag.
Take your investigating to the next level with many of Vortex Ghost Gear's unique and custom creations by Bob Christopher. Visit www.vortexghostgear.com to view all the products and get your equipment today. You can also investigate with Bob and Gina with ghostly excursions, taking people to some of the most haunted locations in the USA. Visit www.ghostlyexcursions.com and join us on our next adventure.
And we're back, and we are talking with John Vespasian. And let me just show you, I have all his books here. These are all his 11 books. They are kind of funky title, looking on the artwork and all. They are so very serious books. This man takes his work completely and utterly serious, and he's pretty brilliant. Just put it that way. He really is. And I love the accent. I love the accent. I can't help it. I have to say it. So, John, welcome back. Why does the book sustain that fast progress will often depend on broken lines?
Yes, this is because by looking at literally hundreds of biographies, I cannot sustain a different view. The impression that we get from basically movies, TVs, is that say people become successful because when they were 5 years old, they knew that they wanted to be CEO of General Electric. And then they went through their college years and they were preparing for this challenge. And then they started at the bottom, and then little by little they rose through the company and they became CEO. And you get this fairy tale of continuity, and you get this fairy tale that people knew exactly what they wanted when they were 5 years old. And the story is fantastic, and in the end there is a happy end, and there is music and everything, and it's complete nonsense. It's a view of human life that is so unrealistic. It wasn't realistic in the 1950s and 1960s when you have these movies all over the place. Now in the 21st century, we have variations of the story, but still it's the same story. Mm-hmm. It's this story of a linear progress. And when you look at reality, you look at the biographies of people and you see how they became successful, it is not linear. It is a broken line all the time. And people tried one thing and then it fails. And then they say, my God, I put 10 years into this business and it was a disaster. What I'm going to do? And they do something else, and they change their products, they change the services. They move to a different place. And eventually, after 30 years of mistakes, they become super successful. And then you see a news item in the newspapers and say, oh, this guy, after 30 years of this company, he became successful because he knew from the very beginning, he knew the answer. And it is nonsense. It is so misleading. It is such a fairy tale that you say it is poison. It is intellectual poison, and it makes people depressed because when people go to college or they go to school and they learn a trade or they learn the profession, and if they don't become successful within 3-4 years, I say, my God, it will never work. They get depressed. They say, why this is not working? And let me give you the answer. It is normal. It happens to everybody. It's a normality. People only usually become happy and successful after a lot of broken lines, a lot of mistakes, a lot of trial and error. And you will not know the truth unless you look at real stories of real people in history and you see how they actually became successful, because the idea that this linear action and this 5-year-old you see in the movies that he knew exactly he wanted to be a baseball player. This is fantasy. It is fantasy. It is a poison, intellectual poison, that it is making you very weak. Let me just give you a little story from the book. There are people basically in Belgium, Germany, in this Central Europe, that they have been studying the lives of saints for hundreds of years. It's a society. It's called the Bolandus Society, and these people have been compiling the biographies of saints. I'm talking basically Catholic Church, but Christian saints in general, since the early times. And they have compiled through the centuries, because this is something that started in the 16th century, and they have been doing this for years. I think they published already 50 books of biographies of saints, and they show all these lives of people in different centuries, how they became religious leader. And they try to draw conclusions, and they try to say how normal people, people who want to become distinguished in religion, how did they become religious leaders? How did they become saints? And I have to tell you, I read some volumes from the collection. It is very interesting because it is very well researched. And I have to tell you, you don't become a saint by doing exactly what everybody else is doing. Just by saying, I'm going to pray very hard. I'm going to become very good. I'm going to do a lot of charity. It doesn't work like this. You only become a leader by doing something out of the ordinary, something that is a broken line. I would say 99% of the biographies you see in this collection, and they're very interesting, even if they're from the 17th, 18th century, they're very interesting because you see people completely lost in their lives. They tried everything. They want to become different. They want to become distinguished. They want to become leaders. And eventually they fall into the answer after a lot of broken lines, and they become successful. But it is not a Hollywood movie. It is a lot of broken lines. So one of the purposes of the book is to wake up people to the reality of these broken lines, these asymmetric events, so that they have a bit more realistic view of life. It is not continuous. It is not linear. It is rarely linear. Most of the time is going to be broken lines. To get the idea that this rejection, these problems, these errors, they are normal. It is human life. It has always been like this. Since people were looking for hunting and gatherers in the primitive societies, they were doing that. It was always like this. There was a lot of trial and error. And eventually you develop the skills to be able to see a solution. Mm-hmm. Don't become crazy because you are facing problems, you are facing bankruptcy, you are facing financial problems. It has happened, always happened, it will continue to happen, and it is not the end of the world. It's just a broken line. Keep looking, and eventually you will be able to find the solution.
Awesome. I always refer back to the caveman days. Like go back there, because you have all the different jobs. People need things, the basics: hunter-gatherers, nurturers, the song people, the artists, to for the stories to pass down to the generations. Basic things. And today it's just it's too much. I think people got to kind of, reel it back in just a little bit. Instead of societal needs, and society says you need to do this and this and this, what makes you happy? And don't be afraid too, like you said about these broken lines, trying something, because what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to fail. Oh, well, then you try something else, right? So,
Yeah, because failures are just a learning chance, a chance to learn something.
yeah, exactly. You can't win every time, you know.
Nope.
Well, some people do. Some
Well, I
people
did.
do.
Wait a minute. You won when you chose me as your co-host. Hello.
I did. I won like that's like winning the lottery.
I'm not so sure how much you won, $1.99, but okay. Poor Taryn is confused. It's okay, darling. You're welcome here anyway. I'm not confused.
We're talking with John Vespasian about his book called Asymmetry, and this is just it's packed. It's packed with information. All his
Yep.
books are packed with information to help you find your way in this world. You know, they are. He's been on the show before. Let me see, what's this say here?
I wouldn't do good in the caveman days. I'm too independent and driven. And I'll fight anyone trying to drag me by the hair unsolicited.
Oh, that's too
Go
funny.
girl.
All right. We're gonna reel it back in. Mama, would you like to ask the next question?
Okay, well, I think you kind of answered it, but maybe you can expand on this. In history, what is the pattern in people who have turned a... Try this one again. My tongue got broke. What is the pattern in people who have turned a chain of failures into a large success?
The pattern is that they learn to see opportunities that they had missed before. And it is like a miracle. It's how can I explain? Imagine that you are learning a language. You're learning Spanish. It's very boring because you are learning words. You forget them. Then you try to put a sentence together, and you make a mistake, and people don't understand you, and it's very frustrating. It's learning a language, foreign language. It's always a challenge for anybody. And you work and you do every day 15 minutes, and you have the feeling that you will never learn it, and you say, oh my God, this language is so difficult. And then one day magic happens. Then one day you wake up, and then you go to a shop, and then you ask for what you want in Spanish, and people understand you, and they give you what you want, and then you say, my God, it worked. It's magic. After so many frustrations, so many disappointments, I can speak Spanish. And then you don't believe it. And I have to tell you, life is the same. You just do little things, and then you learn here, you learn there, and eventually you learn to see, you learn to speak, you learn to do things that they seem impossible. Let me give you an example from history, how someone found the opportunities after 20 years of failure. When I was in Italy, I was last year, I visited a church devoted it's for a congregation called the Oratorians. And the founder, the name was Neri. Philip Neri is very famous in Italy, not so famous in the US, but in Italy he's a very famous leader. Neri, he was making mistakes for 20 years. He was very poor. He wanted to become a leader in a social religion, and he tried everything. He started a foundation to help sick people. He tried to raise money, and he went from house to house for 10 years. I mean, you have to imagine, the guy he tried to make some money by tutoring, so he became a private tutor to children. For 20 years, he tried everything possible to become successful. He wanted to start a social movement, and he failed and failed and failed and failed. And he saw his people with less intelligence, less talent, become famous bankers, lawyers, military officers, and he saw himself as a total failure. And eventually he became super successful. He became more successful than all his friends put together, when he actually found the answer that was always there. And at a certain point, Neri was so frustrated, was so desperate that he wanted to leave everything behind, and he wanted to go to India and say, I failed my life. He was living in Rome, and he applied to go to India as a missionary. And they rejected him. They said, no, you are too old. You will die. You will not survive. You will get a fever and you will die. And he was so depressed, he wanted to give up everything. And eventually, a few weeks later, he said, maybe I could do some kind of Indian stuff in Rome. And he came up with an idea that was amazingly simple, but he could not see it for 20 years because he was so busy trying to imitate other people. And what Neri did was to use resources that were free. They were always there. They were in front of his eyes. And for 20 years, he could not see him. And what he did is a very interesting story. What he did is that he realized that he could not go to India. He wanted to do some kind of pilgrimage, some kind of magical trip. He could not go. He was already in his 40s. He was not very in good shape. And he realized that maybe I could do something locally to give the same experience to people that go to India, and to do it without leaving the city, without leaving Rome. And he realized that the churches in Rome, they were empty on Saturdays, they were empty during the week, and nobody was using them. And he said, maybe I could do something on Saturdays and evenings where nobody's doing anything. And he started on Saturday, he started a local pilgrimage that was completely innovative. He took people for a walk in Rome, a walk that lasted 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And he took them from church to church. He showed the churches that were empty. There were no one there. Nobody was going there on Saturday. He showed them church. He made sort of a small sermon for 10 minutes, and they walked to the next one. He started this on Saturdays. He started to show this sort of event. And within a few weeks, he had hundreds of people walking with him on Saturday from church to church. It was like a local pilgrimage. And the word got out that there was something new going on, that there was this new guy who was doing this sort of a spiritual experience in Rome, where you could walk for 2.5 hours. You didn't have to go to India because you could do it in Rome. The churches were empty, so nobody was complaining because the resources were free. He could have done it 20 years earlier, but he could not see the opportunity because he didn't have the vision. He didn't have the skill. He had to go through this failure to eventually develop the idea to go to India. He had to be rejected for going to India, saying, you are too old. You cannot do it. And eventually he opened his eyes and saw, why cannot do it here? And he did it within a couple of months. He was running a substantial organization because people were giving him money spontaneously and said, this was amazing. People who were never going to church, they would go to these walks. They were very inspirational stories. He would make the speech. He would, and he became a leader. And then he expanded and said, well, I can do it on Saturdays. Maybe I can do it on Wednesday evening. And on Wednesday evening, he started something also unique that nobody was doing. Mm-hmm. He started to go every day to a different church and to preach a sermon in churches that were completely empty. And he did Monday in this place, and Tuesday in this place, and Wednesday in this place. And people found it so unusual that they started to follow him. And he started the new movement. He had no church. He had no organization. He had no money. And within a few years, he had a huge following, By the time he died in 1595, he had a huge organization without ever going to India, without ever traveling. He just did what he found. The resources were free. he was able to see the opportunity because he developed the skill thanks to the rejection, thanks to the failure. So this is the typical story I tell in the book. It's completely asymmetric. You could have that believed that someone was going to start walking in Rome and developing sort of a huge organization. It was inconceivable. And I tell you that Neri came up with the idea because of the failure, because of the broken lines, because of the rejection. And this is something that you have to learn. It is normal. It would not have happened if Neri would have been successful with his idea. He wanted to become, he wanted to create this charity for invalid people, for sick people. It was not the way, because there were already 20 charities. And he did not realize that he was wasting his time. He wasted 20 years. 20 years. So, it happens. And I want people to open their eyes that this is normal life. It is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's very true.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So many, so many things that you think of when you're saying all these stories, and that's the point. I mean, that's the point. Open your eyes. But everyone always relates to something, and personal in their life. You have to find that little moment. Well, this happened to this person. That happened to me. That happened to my mom. That happened to my sister. That happened. So that something's always relative, and that's always the thing when you read one of your books. There's always something relative. And then it's that, oh yeah, well, why didn't I think of that before?
Yeah. Sometimes things are so simple and you don't think about it until you read somebody else has put them into words, like John has done in his books. And many people would be like, it'd be like, aha, one of those aha moments, just reading somebody else is going, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Been there, done that.
So why is it crucial to steer away from decisions that keep people running in circles?
Please, yes.
Gina, I lost for a second. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Why is it crucial to steer away from decisions that keep one running in circles?
I can barely hear you. Please say it again. Sorry.
Okay.
Here, I'll try it.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is it crucial to steer away from decisions that keeps one running in circles?
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit like Neri, that he was running in circles for 20 years. It is difficult to break the pattern because if we don't look further, I mean, if Neri never had looked to India, because in the end he was desperate and said, "Oh, I'm going to India," which was crazy. I mean, it was completely crazy idea. But in the end, if you don't start looking out of the box and start to, you will run around in battles, and you will do always the same thing, and you will have the feeling that there are no opportunities. And the opportunities are there. Even today, these crazy times of this COVID story, there are opportunities. And some people are actually using the time very wisely that they cannot use normally to try to find these opportunities. But you have to do something else. And unless you break the pattern, you will run into circles and you will end up pretty much where you are today. And it is so hard for everyone. It is so hard to look at your life, to look at our own lives from outside and say, oh, the solution was always there. I just could not see it. I could not imagine something different. Let me tell you another story from the book to see how this mentality occurs. One of the stories I tell in the book is about an artist, a painter. His name was Velázquez, from the 17th century, a very famous painter. He became very successful, but at the beginning of his career, he had this running in circles that he would have really become very frustrated, because he was living in south of Spain, in Seville. He got into a workshop of a painter, and they were doing always the same. They were painting Madonnas for churches. He learned how to do it. He was in this workshop for 6 years. So it was a very stable business, but the problem is that the pay was very low. And Velázquez learned to pay these Madonnas and these saints and these paintings. I mean, the paintings were very boring. And you look at these paintings from the 16th, 17th century, they're sort of dark and it's just boring. I mean, you need some talent to produce this stuff. But in the end, nobody would hang these paintings in his living room because they are like sort of sinister and very boring. But Velázquez, when he was living in Seville, this is what he knew, and this was the market. And if you did something else, nobody would buy it because it's you get commissions, and this is what you have to do, and you learn to do these Madonnas, and you just do another Madonna, and that's it. And eventually, when he was in his it was early 20s, he realized this is not the future. If I don't do anything else, if I don't break this pattern, in 20 years, in 30 years, I will still be painting these Madonnas, and I will still be complaining that I cannot get married because I have no money. And eventually, Velázquez said, what else can I do to make some money? Because this Madonna business is very limited. And eventually he realized that the only way to break the pattern was to move. He could not make more money in Seville because the business was the Madonna. And the Madonna business, you just do the same thing for 20 years and that's it. And nobody's going to raise the prices. So eventually he moved to Madrid because he realized that the only way to make money was to paint sort of the Madonnas, but to get paid more. And the only way to be paid more is to find customers, to find clients that they pay you more for doing the same. So he went to Madrid. He found a way to get an introduction to an aristocrat by the name Olivares. So he went to say, I come from Seville. I know how to paint these Madonnas. And I can also paint portraits. And I can paint a portrait of you for free. He went there, and the guy was very skeptical and said, okay, I mean, you want to paint the portrait, be my guest. So he was just there every day. He painted the portrait. It was very good. I have to tell you, to paint this portrait, the effort is the same as painting the Madonnas, because basically what Velázquez was doing in Seville, they would get live models in the workshop, and they painted the Madonnas by using real people. I mean, it was like copying. So to paint the portrait of this guy in Madrid was easy peasy for Velázquez. He did it in a week because it was like painting Madonnas, just painted a guy. And this aristocrat was, wow, this is an amazing portrait. Can you do more? He started to tell his friends and say, look, I got this portrait and it's pretty good. And this is a new guy who just came here, this Velázquez, maybe you want to give it a try. And within a question of months, Velázquez was painting portraits, making 3 times more than he was making in Seville. He became very famous. And at a certain point, he had so many commissions for portraits, because the royal family also wanted portraits, because, oh my God, why I'm not getting this? Everybody's getting his portrait. Why I'm not getting? And eventually Velázquez, he has so much work. He has to figure out a business approach to be able to do it, because in the end, people started to copy him and say, oh, this guy is making a killing with the portraits. Maybe we should also do it. And what is amazing about Velázquez is that he was able to break the pattern several times, because at the beginning, he broke the pattern of the Madonnas by saying, oh, maybe I can do something else. I will do the portraits. And when he was doing the portraits, he realized that he was creating a sort of a new business opportunity. And people were saying, oh, I can do too. Me too. I can also do portraits. And eventually, Velázquez said, "Wow, this is not going well. Everybody's copying my portraits. I have to do something else." And eventually, he traveled to Italy to see what other people were doing. He came up with an idea, say, how can I do this faster? Because a portrait, the problem with the portrait is that if you want to do a big one and with all these things, it takes a lot of work because it can take weeks. And Berkeley said, maybe I can do it in a day instead of doing it in weeks. He figured out how to do it. He developed also a new painting style, which he called the shortcut, because it's in Spanish it's called the manera abreviada. It's a shortcut. He started to make portraits not in a week, but in a couple of days. And the way he did it was by painting basically everything black around, and he just concentrated on the face and the hands. He made these portraits like in a couple of days that previously took him like weeks, and he became very, very wealthy because even the Pope wanted to have a portrait by Velázquez, so he went to Italy. He made the portrait of the Pope, and then he realized maybe I could make even more money, and he started to make copies of these portraits and selling them to other people, because then, of course, the bishop wanted to have a portrait of the Pope, so he made copies of these portraits, and they are in different museums, and they are all original. Is that Velázquez himself was making copies because he realized that he could sell copies. So in the end, the message is that he developed this mentality of pattern breaking. And when he did something and he saw that it was not working, say, maybe I should do something else. Instead of going crazy and say, my God, the market is saturated, I cannot make money. No, you have to see that the way you were thinking, it does not work, or it does not work anymore, because the Madonna's business is very limited. And you have to develop maybe a new outlet for your skills, or you have to develop a new technique to use your skills so that you can make more money, you can work fewer hours, you can become more successful. And this is the message from the book. There is no symmetry in the development. There is always a broken pattern. There is always innovation. There is always the need to think out of the box. If you just keep doing the Madonna business for 20 years, you will not become successful, because there are 20 people doing the Madonnas. And in the end, it's not so difficult. People learn to do the Madonnas, and you will have a very low income, and you will be very, very angry. So please learn from history instead of going crazy.
Amen.
True.
So you
Except
brought
for
up,
Mama get crazy.
yeah, you brought up shortcuts. So what's the best method for identifying asymmetric shortcuts?
Yeah, the best method is exploration. You have to open your eyes. If possible, you have to travel. Like Velázquez went to Italy, and he realized that he could do business in a different way. You have to see what other people are doing. You have to read history. You have to read biographies. Instead of spending 20 years, like Neri, to develop the idea of this local pilgrimage, instead of spending 20 years, if you just read different news sources, not just the mainstream news, just read different sources to read a bit of history. Of course, if you can read my books, that would be great, because they give you in a very short space, because the biographies, they only take a few pages, you develop new ideas very quickly, because you see a breadth of lives, of biographies, that you develop ideas. Because if you are stuck in your career, in your situation, you have medical problems, whatever, if you don't look out of the box, if you don't start thinking, you become crazy. You just you become extremely stressed. So the only way to develop this mentality is to explore different things, to develop new ideas. And it is hard. It is not self-evident. It is not a Hollywood movie, because I tell you, it's like learning a language. Learning a language is very frustrating. I think everybody should learn a second language just to get the experience of frustration. that is like magic. And eventually, you are doing. You mentioned this French situation in Quebec.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks impossible for many people. Say, I'm not a French speaker. I'm not going to learn French. And of course, in Quebec, you don't need it because the Quebec is like a historical vestige in the English-speaking area. But if you are living in a small country in Europe, you cross the border 200 kilometers and they speak a different language. It's actually opening many opportunities to speak a second language, and it's very easy, but it's very frustrating. I have to tell you, the frustration of learning a second language or learning skills, complex skills, is something that you have to go through. It's like the children learning to walk, and they fall and they fall and they fall, and eventually they learn to walk. But it takes months, and they cry, and they become very frustrated, and they call their mama, say, I hurt my knees, but there is no other way. Otherwise, it's like the COVID. You stay at home 20 years and say, oh my God, he's going to get me. But you see, it doesn't work. You have to get immune by facing the problem and by becoming bold. Otherwise, if you just hide under your desk or under your bed, it doesn't solve the problem. And children don't learn to walk if they just say, be safe, don't walk. And say, yeah, be safe and stay in your room. In the end, the children will just die, because this is not human life. This is not how we develop as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think we can compare this part to COVID, but I think when you're learning a different language, immerse yourself in it. For me, I was raised speaking English, and I learned French in school. And when I learned French in school, it was like, you kind of don't want to learn it in school. But when I got a job, then I had to learn the words to do with the company that I was working with. So I learned it a lot faster when I immersed myself in it. And some people end up having to take on a French partner.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when I was little, my grandparents both came over. I'm Finnish and Italian, so I had grandparents that came over from Italy, and I have grandparents that came over from Finland. They only spoke Finnish and Italian. When we were little, if we wanted to talk to them, we had to speak Italian. Now, unfortunately, I was too young when they passed away and that situation stopped. But I do remember some of it. We still do in the Italian family. There are words that we still use now. Mapins and scuda macarons and all these different things. Like you go into the store and you ask for something and they look at you like, what? And it's like, and
A cauldron, dang it.
Yeah. I was like, colander. I was like, what? Put back it on. But you don't. It is easier to learn a second language if you're going to be going there and doing that. My daughter was going to Japan, was one of her all-time favorite places to go. She had an app on her phone. She speaks fluent Japanese now. I mean, of all things. I mean, she's a brilliant learner anyway, but it's all in what you put into it too. But with today's technology, it would be easy to learn a second language using apps on your phone.
Yeah,
And you can
that's
talk
true.
and they can translate it for you and everything too. So yeah, use it wisely. But I did notice though that Spanish and Italian, they're so similar, very,
And
very,
French.
yeah, kind of. But I don't know. You put that. I don't know. French. They're all like those are like the sexy voices. Not like my nice Boston accent. but let me ask you this. All right? Why is the book warning readers against mindless hard work?
Yes, because the tendency to imitate what we watch on movies is very, very strong. Because in the end, you look at your neighbors Your neighbors are doing the same. They are taking a sort of a mindless reflex and say, "Oh, this is the way this happens. You have to do this way, and you have to apply for this job, and you have to live in the city." And today we have, I think, thanks in a way to this COVID situation, many people are questioning their own lives and saying, um, do I have to go back to the same pattern? Even when these constraints are removed, I read in the newspaper today that there was a judge, I think a federal judge in Pennsylvania, that ruled that this COVID lockdown wasn't constitutional. He is questioning the whole thing. And then so imagine that this goes ahead and then the whole thing goes back to normal. People will say, well, that was quite a harsh experience. Maybe I don't want it to happen again. And I'm going to start making some changes in my life to make sure that I don't get caught in the future in anything like this and say, well, maybe I should develop a second source of income so that if my main source of income gets blocked, I can do something else. Maybe I should develop more skills. Maybe I should get a house in the countryside so that if I find it difficult to live in the city, I can go to my farmhouse, I can go to my cottage, I can grow food, and then I don't have to worry about this nonsense. Or maybe I can relocate to the different place where there is where the cost of living is much lower, where there are farmers markets, and I can buy the food directly from the farmer, and I don't have to wear a mask in this supermarket, wherever. So in the end, the COVID story, I think many people, clever people in the end, instead of saying, I just want to go back to the same situation again, maybe they start asking questions and saying, well, there is a story, there is a lesson here. Maybe I need to diminish my vulnerability as an individual to these situations in the future, because it will happen again. This is one of the lessons from the book. You always get the impression that, I have this problem, and if I remove the problem, everything will be fine. No, it will not be fine. There will be another problem. And next week, okay, there might not be another COVID, but there will be something else. There will be some event, and then people will again overreact.
Yep.
They will tell you it's the end of the world. It has never happened before. It's a crisis that nobody will survive. And you hear the same story again. If you don't learn the lesson, if you do not develop strategies, asymmetric strategies that will prevent this situation from affecting you so deeply, you will be again a victim. History shows that people learn and people go through problems, and many people say, well, this is not working for me. This is not working for me. I'm going to do something else. And you see the biographies I present in the book, you see people going through all kind of crises, wars, sickness, bankruptcy, and saying, well, this is not working for me. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to start thinking asymmetrically. And they find solutions, but they get the mentality that broken lines is normal. It's the way to go. It's the way you learn. It's the way you become stronger. The way where you acquire more skills. The way you develop your motivation. The motivation from this COVID story should not be to kill yourself. Should not be to become depressed, to become despondent. No, you should be creative. You should be looking at history and say, this has happened before. Similar situations has happened a million times. And the right answer is to become stronger, not to become weaker.
That's very true.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah. I wish people would learn from history, but they really don't. They really don't. Doomed to repeat. You want to ask the next question?
Yeah. Why is it wrong to invest yourself heavily in unproven opportunities?
Yeah, investors. In the book, I present also some biographies of investors. Investors have a different look at reality than the normal person. The other day I was discussing with one of my friends. She's younger. She's complaining, well, I have no money. And I was trying to convince her to open a brokerage account to say, can you invest $100? Can you just open an account and you just buy an ETF and you buy gold or you buy something, just $100, just to get the feeling of what it means to be an investor. Because I tell you, you will start looking at the world in a completely different way. When I see these people with riots and they say, oh, they are burning malls or I don't know, supermarkets, whatever they're doing, which is it is ridiculous because very often they are burning their own neighborhoods. And say, what are you going to do if you burn the supermarket? Where are you going to get food in the next months, assuming the supermarket opens again? I mean, it's completely crazy. And in history, if you are not an investor and you realize that someone put his money in the supermarket, someone opened the shop, someone opened this business, someone built the city, built a house, and it requires a hope in the future. It requires a perspective, and it makes people more benevolent. If you imagine that you have this $100, which is a small amount of money, but you can open an account, a brokerage account for nothing. It will not cost you anything. And you buy an ETF, or it's a mutual fund, or you buy shares, and you buy shares of a Japanese company. I say, well, this looks interesting, Japan. I always like Japan. I don't know. You buy shares of Sony or whatever. Then you start. I tell you, the next day you go to the internet and you check the share of Sony and say, well, I want to know, did I make? And you made $2 profit. I say, well, it's amazing. So this is going up, and you start to learn about Japan, and maybe you start to think, oh, maybe I should invest in, I don't know, in China, because China seems like the place to be. And you invest another $100. I mean, they're small amounts, but the difference is that you open your views. You start to think about more opportunities. You start to think about other countries. If you buy your $100 in China, I guarantee you will not want war with China for $100.
Yeah.
Because you will have your investment in China, and you will have shares of, I don't know, Chinese internet. For instance, there is a Chinese company similar to Google. There is a Chinese company similar to Facebook. It's called Tencent. You can buy shares for €100. It's a company is growing exponentially, and you have your $100 invested, and you don't want war with China. You don't want war with anybody, because it will hurt your investment, and you look at the world in a different way. And this is why in the book, this is something that I actually repeat in my book. My God, get the $100 and buy shares of something, and start looking at the world like an owner, like an investor, like a wise person that realizes that the way to prosperity and happiness is to create new things, to create new companies, to create new jobs, to create new services, to actually to grow, not to destroy, not to burn things down, not to kill people, not to start a war. And this is very important. And when people become very aggressive and very frustrated, and they start violent action, I think nobody told them to open this brokerage account for $100 and say, come on, start becoming wiser, start to become more skilled. It will cost you $100, but you will learn a new view of the world. You will look at the news, and you will start questioning when you watch on TV and say someone, because China is not going good, whatever. You say, no, 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 no. I know better because I have my shares of Tencent and they're going up. And I know China is doing this and this. So it's not really so bad. And you will be more benevolent. You will be more moderate in your views because you will realize that people are basically the same everywhere. It is not that, I don't know, Chinese or the Koreans, or they are like evil and they want to kill you and whatever. I mean, come on, wake up. It's travel, buy shares of whatever, but open your eyes. And this in the book, I say, if you can develop this investor mentality or this investor view, even if it's only if you just put $100 in your investments, you will become a different person. You will be able to look at problems with a different perspective, and you will become more friendly and more open to experience, because people tend to become very, very angry and very frustrated when they do not have this perspective, when they just think, oh, I have to destroy something because I am angry. No, think, look at history, open your eyes. Otherwise, we already have too much distraction in the world.
Oh my God.
Very true.
I think of all the things you've said tonight. Please, people, listen to that.
Yeah,
Right, please.
exactly. You know, there was a store in the States, a grocery store in the States, and this was during the high time of the oh God, I just lost my brain. No, the 1% rule the world. Yeah, but if we all become like he says, invest $100, that doesn't, you know, in something, then we will all eventually have something to rule. No, there was a grocery
invested. It's being vested in people, in a culture, in
exactly.
a situation. It's like you're involved. It's not something that's happening just as you're watching TV and you can shut it off and be like, oh, whatever, they're gonna do whatever and walk away. But if you're invested in it, you know, and vested, not just invested. So becoming invested, you can become vested. So now you're putting yourself in that situation, in those people's shoes, and you want them to succeed. But they are people. We're all people. You know, no matter where you are, what country or continent you're on, we're all people. All our blood is red. You know, we all have, you know, families and jobs and lives. You know.
Yeah. So the grocery store that I was talking about was during the riots, you know, and people came and broke into the store, and the people who lived in that neighborhood were the ones who worked in the grocery store. And once it had happened, it had broken up and nothing was burnt or anything, but it was just badly damaged. All the people from the neighborhood, the ones who worked there and their families and the ones who didn't, came to clean up and continued to serve the people of the neighborhood, because the riots just sort of like a wave, it just rushed through and destroyed that, you know, a bunch of other stuff, but that store and the employees were people of the neighborhood. So they were, you know, it was not just my job, but it's where I go get my groceries, where my baby food and all that stuff. So they went back and helped out to bring it, you know, even though this was before the COVID.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's another situation too. That's wonderful that people step up. All right, John, we're down to like 2 minutes. What would be the thing that you want people to take away? Why they should get your book?
Yeah.
Yes, if people just remember one thing from the conversation today, is that broken lines, asymmetry is normal. You have to wake up to the reality of history, to the biographies, to the situation that what we're facing today, whatever your problems you have, whether it's medical problems, financial, family problems, they are not unique. They have happened a million times. Most of the time, the solution is going to be asymmetric. You are going to have to make some changes that are not obvious. They are not linear. They might be annoying, they might be irritating, but you will get through it and you will do well. And I want to give your listeners a message of hope. Don't get caught in the story that there is no alternative. It is nonsense. There is plenty of alternatives. Look around, look at the past, look at other countries, look at other people, look at other situations. Open your eyes and find opportunities. Don't become depressed.
Perfect. Perfect.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you can see all of his books are on like Amazon, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
Amazon.com. I think they were also on Barnes and Noble. I did a little bit of research.
Oh, good girl, good girl.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, John, for being with us again. And so if it's a book a year, I guess we'll be having you again next year.
Mhm.
and we'll be looking forward to that. And thank you for joining us. And we'll see you all next week.
Many thanks, Gina, Mamadi. See you soon. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you again for joining us for another episode of The Fox Den. We would love it if you would go over to our YouTube channel, which is The Fox Den, hosted by Gina Bankston. Please like and subscribe our channel and join us in the chat room there while we stream live every Thursday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next week. Good night.